Dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you all. My name is Banka Kirai and I'm a student here at MCC. The topic of today's discussion is going to be sustainable cities, and during the conversation we will learn about how these cities operate. I'm going to ask the following experts about it. Brian Lin, researcher at the Budapest Center for Long-Term Sustainability. Tamás Pálvölgyi, Vice Dean for Strategy and International Affairs of the Faculty of Water Sciences at the University of Public Service, and Lila Bartosek, Project Manager of Sustainable Cities. Before we would start, I would like to raise the attention of the audience that you have the opportunity to ask through the Slido app. You can find the code right there behind us, and please ask questions during the presentation. So I think if you guys are ready, I think we should start. My first question is, why do we need to talk about sustainable or climate-friendly cities at all?
Okay, so I guess it's directed to me then. Welcome everyone, and thanks so much for joining us, and thank you so much for the invitation. Well, I think that the answer for this question is quite obvious. So if we take a look at how do we spend our everyday lives, what aspects of our daily life actually is connected to sustainability, it's really obvious that we do live in settlements, we do live in cities or towns. So it's, for me at least, it was quite obvious that when we talk about the implementation of the SDGs, it's quite obvious that we have to find that specific level, which is not the individual level, and I'm happy to talk about it a bit more later on, why I do believe that putting all the emphasis on individual sustainability is quite counterproductive, in my opinion. So I think we have to find the perfect level of implementation, which is close enough to the citizens to actually know what's going on in their daily lives and how it can be turned into a more sustainable action. But it's also like a level of implementation where we do have the decision makers already involved. And that's, for me, quite obviously the level of local governments and municipalities. So this indirectly answers the question of why do we have to talk about sustainable cities. But also, to directly answer your question, it's just simply that this is the place where we can really do something about urban sustainability on a daily basis.
Let me use one real example to answer this question. There's a small island called Bornholm, Bornholm. That's a Danish island located in the Baltic Sea. It's on the southeastern side of Sweden. So actually, Bornholm, the island, is much closer to Sweden. So this island has decided to close down its landfill and the incinerator. Okay, so the Bornholm has decided to close down landfill and the incinerator by 2032. By 2032. So then we need to know why this small island, the community, has made that decision to close down landfill and the incinerator. So, so the reason is that to make sure we have sustainable consumption and production, and then we need to make some really, really big change. So that's the reason if we check right now, many community, many city, many countries in the world, they have take a very serious action to protect the environment and also try to design a good environment for the city, the community, or even for the whole country. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation. The first question, I think this is one of the most questioned, that what is the real meaning of sustainable cities, and who is responsible what? And my approach is that that sustainability, even in urban context, is not an environmental issue. It's not a pure green issue. It's much more social and economical issue. And if we consider these two dimensions, two additional dimensions, the economical and social dimensions of sustainability, we could identify a lot of very painful problems related to the poverty, or energy poverty, or social inclusion and other problems. So my feeling is that, if I could say it, that we, or the scientists fully aware of the importance of the necessary steps. The politicians, the real sphere decision makers, either in the municipalities or in a company, also fully aware of the necessary steps. But there are some barriers in front of the real actions. So the implementation is relatively weak, and the rhetorics and the documents are relatively strong.
If I just maybe add a quick follow-up to this, I couldn't agree more. We've just been exchanging some thoughts before the session started about how important it is to emphasize that sustainability is not just a green issue. And actually, I'm just like to share a really good example on municipal level to actually support this statement, which is that with my company, we really often consult with decision makers on local level, with municipalities. And one of the first things that I have to convince them about is that I'm not here to just talk about the so-called green stuff. And I think it's really important, because this is one of the biggest barriers when it comes to sustainability, and especially urban sustainability, that we tend to just stick with, okay, what can a municipality do? Or what can citizens do? And then we stick with, okay, we plant some trees, okay, then we make sure that there are more green spaces. Don't get me wrong, green spaces and planting trees, they're really important small steps, but this is not sustainability. This is not what the whole thing is about. We really have to take here a holistic approach. And this is what's definitely missing, in my opinion, when it comes to the implementation. And it's definitely missing on the urban level, because there the focus should be on the citizens, and I think this is what's still lacking.
And now that we talked about what sustainable cities are, I think it would be very wise to share that how does a sustainable city look like?
Well, sustainable cities look like, from my sense, the best example is if you close your eyes and imagine your day and how it would be the most convenient for you and how it would be most convenient for your environment, and I'm not just mean the green environment, but also your fellow citizens, also your friends, your family. And if you can check all the tick boxes that comes to your mind, that's a sustainable city. But of course, that's a really abstract answer. So just to be more concrete, obviously there are some key points when it comes to urban sustainability that has to be taken into consideration. Of course, one of them is the question of mobility, so how people move around. Also, one of the other questions could be waste management, it could be water management, but also infrastructural questions, the questions of buildings, but also on a more social note, the question of education from really kindergartens to university. Obviously, not all of them belong in the competence of municipalities. That's really important to emphasize. But still, the whole management of the city, that should be sustainable, meaning that everything should be organized in a way that is both economically and also socially and environmentally sustainable. And I'm pretty sure that in the upcoming hour, we're going to talk about lots of these solutions.
Well, a sustainable city, I guess, first must be energetic. So here I want to, because a sustainable city can be defined from different dimensions. Also, people have different perspective about sustainable city. But today, I want to spend more time on discussing sustainable city from the perspective of young people, especially young men. If you read the literature, right now it's very clear. It's very clear. Younger generation, younger people pay more attention to the sustainability issue than older generation. That's very clear. Even if you read the journal article, newspaper, younger generation pay more attention to sustainable issue than older generation. And then, so in that case, then we want to know what are the perspective of sustainable city from younger generation. For example, young people, they just might want to stay at a city, and they feel this is a good place. They want to stay there and find a job. And right now, younger generation, they do not want to work very hard and earn a lot of money, but just a decent job to help them have a decent life at a city. So in that case, if you look from that dimension, to define a sustainable city, especially from younger generation, that would be quite different from older generation or from city official. Because from the city official perspective, city official might want to attract more business people to come to a city to create more jobs, which is good. But if the job only creates small job for some high-paid individual or entrepreneur, who may not be very good for young people. So then I would like to say that a sustainable city, from my perspective, the first point is that must be able to attract enough number of young people to come to the city and to stay there and work together. And then I think that's very important. So the young people may not just come from local, could be from other country or even from a foreign country. So they are willing to come to the city and stay together, work together. So I really see Budapest has that a great potential. Yeah.
So, sorry to say it, but I have a divergent or unorthodox view on sustainable cities perspective. So, in my so my feeling is that a sustainable city should be somehow a solution provider. Solution provider for their citizens. What does it mean? Let's have a look on a typical unsustainable problem in urban context: the water. The water is both the rainwater or the sewage treatment should be somehow solved in the urban context. Of course, it's an integrated technical and non-technical issue. There are a lot of innovations which could be useful to keep the water on the area of the city. But for example, another area where a city or a municipality, it's even better word, a municipality could provide solutions, the demography. What is the population of a city? Because somewhere, even in Europe, a lot of big cities are older and older. There are less youth generation, and the keeping power of these cities are less and less. So my view is that the institutions of the cities should somehow reprogram themselves for solution providing. And I absolutely agree with you that the youth generation is a key point in this issue. And in this context, I highly attribute a great importance for the schools, the elementary schools, the middle schools, the universities. So the schools should be or could be the focal or central point of the transition to urban sustainability.
And if I also just may add a quick follow-up here, exactly, I also couldn't agree more. And I think the question is not the importance of schools, because we pretty much agree that education is really key when it comes to sustainability. I think the question is how that kind of knowledge is transferred, and to that, what I think would be really, really important when it comes to sustainability transition is the new method of really non-frontal, non-formal education. Because when it comes to education, it's not just the knowledge that needs to be gained, but it's also the skill set. And when it comes to sustainability in general, but also especially urban sustainability, it's really important that those institutions that you just mentioned need to transfer their everyday life in terms of solutions. They need to have creative solutions, they need to have new methodology, they need to have state-of-the-art solutions. But in order for them to get that, is obviously they need to have a new skill set that is fit to actually fight all those skills or all those new challenges that comes with the 21st century in general, but also comes with the unsustainable system that we are currently living in. And just to go back to the role of education, this is why, for example, with my company, we're supporting municipalities in Hungary who are actually trying to pilot projects where they give the room, they give the space to teachers, whether it's really kindergarten or it's elementary school, high school, or even university, where on their specific level, they need to give that specific skill set to the students. And obviously for a 3-year-old, it would be just simply realizing that it's really important that, you know, the trees are also living creatures. But for university students specifying in one or the other area, it's really important to know how they could contribute to their specific field. And this is why it's also really important to know, especially when it comes to urban sustainability with such a diverse perspective as we're currently discussing, it's really important to see that everyone in their given sector, in their given job can actually contribute a lot to urban sustainability. And this is why, and here I end my comment, this is why it's really important to, as you mentioned, have this kind of new approach, but this new approach has to have this kind of holistic perspective in a sense of knowing that everyone can contribute equally to the solution. And this is why it's important to also know that whenever we're talking about sustainable cities, we're not just talking about the environmental aspect, we're also talking about the social and the economic aspect, because this is how joint solutions can be made and how the problem can be tackled.
Do you allow me to add something to this point? I believe that there is an additional important stakeholders group in urban sustainability issue. The people of the public administration, the civil servants, both in the authorities, the local authorities, both the municipality offices, governmental offices. I strongly believe that their knowledge and their attitude or awareness is an important point on the transition to sustainability, because they are the so-called the flagger of the implementation. So they could be in the target of the transition to the sustainability.
So we all agree on that a transition is needed, and what innovative solutions can help to make this transition to sustainability faster?
I think we pretty much primarily answered this in a sense of when it comes to innovative solutions, innovation can be really a wide area, because the question is, in what field do we want to innovate? So my answer to this question is that innovation should be the method and not necessarily the area itself. So innovation should be in the questions that we ask. Innovation should be in the method that we're looking for when it comes to finding solutions. And it's really, I think, shows how divergent the question of sustainability is, because it really, there is such a layered approach to urban sustainability that when it comes to your question of what innovative solutions can help, I think we will have really different opinions when it comes to water management, education, or to the general daily lives of municipalities, or when it comes to other areas that we are, I think, on an individual basis maybe more deep dwelled into. So in this sense, the general comment to this question is that the methodology should be innovative.
Here I have a proposal. May not be feasible, but I guess I would like to share with all of you. I got that idea on the party cruise. Okay, party cruise. I took a cruise 3 times. The first party cruise, myself alone. The next is sightseeing cruise, and the third one is a dinner cruise with my wife and a daughter. For the party cruise, it's very cold. On Friday or Saturday night, very cold. So the crew about 100 young people. I believe I'm the oldest person, all young people. And probably at least 70 to 80% are European students. They are all European students. Because I went there alone, and then I did not dance, I just enjoy myself. But I watched them, and so at least 2 students, they approached me, and we have a very good conversation. So because I have a very long association with young people, so I would like to say that young people, they really like to have their own way to express their idea. But I believe at the same time, they still feel good to see some older people stand behind them to provide some support. Or if they want some idea, they can consult from time to time, something like that. So even on a party cruise, they enjoy themselves. But when they feel bored, they find an older guy over there, so they still came to see me. So, but here, on that night, I got an idea about if we want to promote Budapest, since there are so many European students, they really enjoy visiting here. No more, they just stay a couple of days, but I believe they will come back again. So if we want to promote sustainability, of course, it's very comprehensive. Probably we can just initiate a very small project or event. For example, we call, like today's February 24. February 24 is the Sustainability Day for a day for international young men, something like that, international young person. So if a young person, they visit Budapest, they can join many free lunch, free cook from community or from City Hall, something like that. So that means the city is very friendly to international students, something like this. So I guess, or even a busy company can initiate that kind of a small event. And then I believe we can begin from that small point and then gradually expand that idea. And then I believe Budapest has that potential, so there's no need to initiate a very comprehensive plan. We can begin from one small idea and then to check whether this idea is feasible or not. Yeah.
I'm sorry to chip in, but with all due respect, I would disagree a bit, because it's a really good thing that you're suggesting when there is already a solution in movement that we need to raise attention to. But when it comes to the question that was originally asked of what innovative solutions could help, in my understanding, this methodology that you're suggesting and many other similar ideas that are already out there on the market, the problem with there is it feels like it's just a talk shop. And it misses the point in my perspective, which is the actual solution. I'm not disregarding the fact that obviously raising attention to these questions are important, but then in my understanding and in my perspective, really often what the problem is that we're focusing so hard on raising awareness that we are actually focusing less on actually finding the solution to raise awareness too, if that makes sense. So this is why I would kindly disagree with this, because I think the biggest problem is that there's so many talented either young people or already senior researchers doing their everyday job to actually find these solutions. But when these kind of movements come along, and those who know me know also that I kind of prefer the policy over the action in terms of movements. But in my understanding, it's really counterproductive because it's really easy to be trapped into a situation where there is a really nice approach, but still it's being criticized because there is no actual content in it. And then no matter how quickly the content will get generated, still the first impression that people will feel is that it's just a talk shop. And this is, I think, what we, or at least what I, with my company and foundation, try to really move around, because I don't really want people to associate sustainability and also the other areas that comes with sustainability with just the talk shop that people present also in international levels or European Union levels or even national or municipal level. I want people to know that when it comes to sustainability, what they have to think about is that what they can do as decision makers, as citizens, as business entities, enterprises, or even NGOs, and not how they can communicate it. Because I think that there we're missing the point, and this could be a long-term solution.
Okay, so the question was that who could be the booster of the transition? I think the question is easy. The answer is easy. The motivated people. But who could provide the motivation? That's the question. And I can imagine that in a smaller scale, so for example, in a case in a small town or in a case of a village, we could find much more easier the motivations for the transition. So for example, the traditional lifestyle. It could be a motivation for a lot of people and more people to be more sustainable, to step towards sustainability. But how can it work in a bigger city or in a mega city, for example, in Far Asia? How could the traditions or the traditional knowledge, the traditional senses, how could promote the sustainable lifestyle? Because, frankly speaking, the consumption patterns absolutely override this kind of attitude. So if the young generation will follow the same consumption pattern than us, this kind of coping will not work. So I could attribute a greater importance for the traditions, which could work in a smaller scale, but I don't know how could it work in a city similar than Budapest or Bangkok or other cities.
But then wouldn't you agree if I suggest that actually then financial incentives and also legal incentives could help this transition in a sense that obviously, and here I would go back on my initial idea on individual responsibility over collective responsibility, is that you're absolutely right in the consumption patterns and you're absolutely right in the behavioral aspects of sustainability, but I believe that this is the hardest part to change, and the kind of easiest part to change is the regulations and the incentives behind them. So in this sense, actually the ball is in the court of the decision makers, better on local level or national or even above, because we have to put this kind of pressure on the society to change or to want to change.
Only partially agree with you. In my feeling is that sustainability is an emotional issue. So our heart is more important than our brain. I am not sure, and of course I have no proof. But according to our experiences, that how the regulational solutions or the financial incentives assist the sustainability transition. Do we have good examples? Do we have cities where the financial incentives solve the unsustainability problems?
Maybe I can tell something about the Japan, yeah, because I've been to Japan very often. So, Japan is a highly industrial society. So Japan also very good public transportation. So like the Tokyo, that big city, you can see a car there's so many people. And also, right now, we also talk about smart city. So many people, when they talk about smart city, they emphasize how we use modern technology, internet things to get people stay connected, which is good, more effective to help government officials monitor, including making a right decision. I think that's very good. But right now, a very fundamental issue in Japanese society, as you can see, even with modern technology, very good transportation, but many people, including young people, they just stay at their home or apartment all the time. So they only use modern technology to get connected with the outside world. They don't want to meet person. So here, I want to emphasize that it's good to use modern technology, but we still need to meet people all the time, so to communicate. And so right now, a real issue, really serious issue in Japan is that I don't know the percentage, but you will see many young people, they stay far away from older generation. So they tend to live in very isolated environment. Even for their peer group, they stay isolated with each other. So that's a really big problem in Japan. So I would like to say that if we want to see a city grow and then grow into a sustainable future, of course, different societies have a different characteristic, but still we can take other society into account. And then, so I would like to say that a sustainable city must be able to help a citizen, different generation. Older generation would like to communicate with younger generation, and younger generation would like to consult with older generation, so they will not live isolated from each other. Yeah, so I guess that's very important.
Yeah, but just also to follow up quickly, so I completely agree with you saying that the generational gap is obviously one of the biggest challenges when it comes to the real implementation. And to that point, I think that the real question that should be asked is actually how can we find, and here I would like to also join to what you just mentioned about the emotional part, which obviously plays a crucial role. Standing by my point that also the economic and financial incentives do count a lot. But when we stay with emotions, we have to find with every generation that specific booster that gives them the incentive to actually deal with urban sustainability or sustainability at all at their own level or at their own jobs, for example. And to that, I think what we're really missing is that, but I'm really eager to also hear the opinion of my distinguished fellow panelists, but I think what we're missing is the original standpoint. So where do we stand now? We do not have the data of where do we stand now in many aspects of urban sustainability. Thus, it's really hard to actually find the solutions or even to try to figure out the solutions, because as long as we do not have the data on how do we stand with the SDG targets and indicators, for example, as long as we do not have the necessary knowledge on how exactly each generation feel or how exactly each generation would and could contribute to the urban sustainability discussions and also the implementation per se, then we cannot really figure out the solutions. And I think this is something that's on a global scale, a problem, but I think this could be really smoothly be turned into action on local level, because it's really hard to have international data gathered so quickly. But in my opinion, it would be much easier to gather this kind of data on local level and thus actually convert it into an action plan, and then the action plan into strategy, and then the strategy into actual action and legislative steps.
So let's have a look on a concrete example. I think all of us, we know that there is a typical unsustainable consumption. This is the meat consumption. Do we know the solution? Yes. There are a few technical innovation, artificial meat, and substitution with other foods. But there are another dimension of the solution, the so-called social innovation. Social innovation, at this sense, I mean the vegetarianism. And may I ask you that how many vegetarians are among us? Please raise your hand. No vegetarians? Not yet. Okay. I strongly believe that that within 10 years or even 5 years, within 5 years, there will be much more vegetarians. And those people who turns to vegetarian lifestyle, they will be happy, they will pay less, they have much more smaller footstep on or footprint on the environment, on water and carbon dioxide, and so on and so on. So I think that the motivation, either the financial or regulatory side, motivation for the technological innovation and the social innovation, both are important.
Sorry, but I couldn't keep that to myself, but I have to intervene. Yes, of course, people, there are statistics saying that this and that is the consequence of going vegetarian, but my whole point is strongly to emphasize that this is individual responsibility. I do encourage everyone to read and decide accordingly whether they do want to go vegetarian, whether they do not want to go vegetarian. But I think that our role as people who are discussing these subjects and people who are having little or a big influence in what's happening in this course of action, we do have to concentrate on those actions that also would at least make us feel more confident and happy, such as, do I have to stay 30 to 40 minutes in my car every single day to actually get to work? What kind of quality education my child or children get? Am I actually living in an environment where I do not have to really go and evacuate the city for the weekend to actually have some fresh air? Can I actually go and have a fresh air walk with my, let's say, newborn, or do I have to really travel miles and miles away to get that? Or also, do I have to deal with the waste management? Do I have to deal with the water management issues? So these are the questions that, in my opinion, are the roles of decision makers to act upon and not the individuals. Because obviously, and I'm not saying that, for example, meat consumption doesn't belong to this round of questions, but I believe that this is exactly one of the points of the discussions that we had before the panel, is that really putting these questions in people's head when it comes to sustainability is actually just a counterproductive discussion item, at least in my point. Because here, for example, we're having a really high-level discussions on urban sustainability. Great. What we want the audience to take away is that how they as a citizen can actually live an everyday life where they can contribute to urban sustainability. And while meat consumption obviously belongs to something that people decide upon themselves, but I believe that the message we want to give out is how they can influence the decision makers, how they can influence their environment, how can they actually think long-term in order to find these kind of urban sustainability solutions. And that starts with the questions about electric cars, the questions about how to use mobility, how to deal with different segmental areas of urban sustainability. And maybe it's just my taking point that meat consumption is one of the really divergent questions that I believe really gives the whole discussion a completely different course, which I'm not sure would actually give solution to the urban sustainability questions.
And we mentioned implementation of urban sustainability several times throughout the discussion. So my question would be that in the process of real implementation of urban sustainability, how's the responsibility divided between local government decision makers, the business sector and the private sector?
Well, I'm a university professor, so so normally I try to encourage my students when they finish their study on campus, when they find a job, they should try to create more pressure on company. Sorry about that. Yeah. So I normally why? Because big corporations are very powerful. I mean, like multinational corporations, they are really powerful. So if they are willing to make even a small change, probably will generate a very dramatic impact. But it's not that easy for big corporation to make a small change. But fortunately, right now we know CEO, but right now there's a so-called CSO, Chief Sustainability Officer. So right now, we found more and more corporations, not just big, even for medium-sized corporations, they are willing to hire people to pay attention on sustainability issue, which is good. So of course, there is no easy solution to approach the target, because for example, it's not that easy to ask people to reach a target, and then we all agree, even we agree on that target, but how we reach that target, people probably they have different opinion on that. So I guess that really no easy work. And then you just talk about meat consumption. Actually, I've been under pressure for at least 2 or 3 years. Because in Taiwan, I teach a course. I teach two courses regularly. One is circular economy and sustainability. Another course is called circular business model. So that's a circular economy business model. So all my students, 80% are from European students. So they are exchange students. They came to Taiwan and then studied in Taiwan. So I at least met 2 female students. At least 2. They are vegan. They are vegan, female students. So they talk to me, and they try to persuade me to become a vegan. And my reply is that let me think about that. I will give you a reply later. But I took this in a very serious manner. Okay, but I already spent 2 years, and eventually I believe I will become a vegan or vegetarian very soon. Yeah, in order to give them a good, because they are looking for my answer. But that's another issue. But here I just want to emphasize that it's no easy task to ask people to reach a target. And then even you reach a target, and then how we achieve that target, this process could be several years. And so in that process, now you ask how the government official, city official, or even a central government official, and including the business leader, how they take the full responsibility. I would like to say that's really important. So probably we need some business leader, or including some government official and some local community leader, including young leader. They can meet from time to time to discuss some proposal accepted by all of them. So that could be a very time-consuming process. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's also a very important question, the share of the responsibility. And you mentioned the municipality, the government, local government, the people, but I should add an additional dimension of the potential responsible institutions, the neighbors' municipalities. Because the cities are not alone, so they are integrated in their circumstances. They in a real life, they are living together with their circumstances. And sometimes very painful, unsustainable patterns can be identified. For example, when a city which, for example, set a target to decrease the carbon dioxide emission, a carbon-intensive factory, for example, a cement plant, relocate to the neighbor's city. Is it sustainable or not? Of course not. But it is outside of the city border. So I think the responsibility could be a broader sense, and from regulatory point of view, it's very, very hard to tackle that this kind of unsustainable relocation. Another point, I don't want to exclude your question. I think, and I should stress again, the importance of the officials, the civil servants, because they are the implementer. They are at the end point of the implementation, and they could send signals to the politicians or the higher decision makers that something wrong. Something is in a wrong way. So I believe that their education, their training, improve their environmental awareness could be a good tool to move towards sustainability.
Yeah, no, so this is, the question itself, I think, proves the necessity of the holistic approach when it comes to sustainability. And I do agree with both gentlemen here that we have to take a look at every single level. So let's start with academia, for example, that was mentioned that explicitly before. So we do have the knowledge, we do have the necessary skill set and the necessary data. It's with the academic sector. We do need to listen to those who have these answers, who have these data. And actually, these kind of data should be integrated in the processes. And then next step is what kind of processes. Obviously, then comes the business sector, for example. There are the business chain, the supply chain, the procurement processes, and also obviously CSR, as that was mentioned, as one of the biggest part of the contribution that the business sector can make when it comes to sustainability. But also those kind of data gathered from the academics, from the professors, and from those who actually spend every day of their lives researching and gathering the answers for us who are asking the questions. Obviously, then comes the decision makers, both on the local level, but also on the national level, because there is also an interlinkage between these two, because it's been over and over proved that whenever there are enough cities or enough local governments pushing for a solution or pushing for an agenda item, then that agenda item will become actually a priority also on a national level. And I think this is really a great example to show that what's the role of the civil society, so that I'm just jumping from one sector to another, but it proves, I think, my point of the holistic nature, that then the civil society should be the one, on the one hand, being consulted with, and on the other hand, being listened to, because then decision makers can get a lot of answers out of the civil society by consulting them. But on the other hand, also, they can help them with actually integrating their views, their ideas into the decisions and the strategies and the action plans to be made. So we have this kind of pillar system, really starting from the academics to the highest levels of decision making. And I think that to also conclude our discussion and the question of what could be the urban sustainability dream goal is, I think, to go step by step all of these pillars and really make sure that they are interconnected, they are integrated, and the synergies that are there at every specific pillar is actually well connected and used. And what's, I think, the most important way to do that is to actually transfer the necessary knowledge and skill set, to go back to one of my first comments, because as long as any of those sectors, from the academic sector to the civil servants, to the civil society, children and adults likewise, as long as they do not have the necessary skill set to actually think holistically about these questions and actually implement these kind of policies or solutions or strategies in their everyday lives, no matter whether they are working in the civil society sector, whether they are working in the business sector, or they are just, for example, running an NGO, as long as they do not have this kind of skill set, they won't be able to even ask the real questions or ask the necessary questions for which they have to find the right answers to.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so just one last question from the audience to conclude what we discussed here today is a perspective on Hungary, because Lila, you mentioned that you prefer policies over movements, and do you all think that the current Hungarian policies are good enough?
So I have the honor to answer these questions. Thank you so much for that. Let me be a bit diplomatic here. I believe that Hungary has every potential to become pioneering in sustainability in general and urban sustainability. I do believe there is really a long way to go, and I believe that these kind of events such as we're having today and also many other events are really, really great, as long as they are not turning into talk shops that I mentioned earlier. And let me correct a bit in what I've said about movements and policy. I'm really often on stage with movement leaders. I don't want to name these movements, but I think everyone knows in the audience what are the biggest movements that exist. And although we disagree on many things, one thing that we agree is the goal that we want to reach. However, and I strictly stand with this point of mine, is that we do have different roles when it comes to this whole process. And they do have a role in raising awareness. They do have a role in involving those who prefer being heard, being out of the streets, raising awareness to these kind of really important questions. But in my opinion, as long as the decision makers, as long as the civil servants, as long as municipalities and local leaders are not ready to hear them, then we are just running in circles. And in conclusion to the question that was raised by the audience, my point is that we will be in a good place when it comes to urban sustainability if these kind of processes will be implemented on a daily basis and if all the stakeholders will be equally involved.
Thank you. So my point is that the actual policy is never enough. But more seriously, Hungary has almost 10 years or more than 10 years ago a national sustainable development strategy. Every 2 years a progress report has been made. This progress report, I personally participate in the preparation of these progress reports. So I strongly believe that this is the most comprehensive view on the progress or the lack of the progress in Hungary. And I have a good news that we are on the right way. Of course, not all indicators are on the right track. But in European intercomparison, we are in the middle range. And if we have a look on a time dimension of the performance of Hungarian sustainability, we are, after a stagnation, we are in an improving way. Of course, this is a very vulnerable situation because if a strong industrialization could come, it could be changed.
Thank you for this exciting and very interesting, informative discussion, and thank you for the audience for the questions. If you're interested in the topics of sustainability, you should follow the social media pages of the Climate Policy Institute and also the Budapest Center for Long-Term Sustainability, and see you next time. Enjoy the rest of your evening.